flying wedge. They'd kick off and everybody would lock arms, and one guy in the front that led the charge, and I don't know why I think of Tom Homan is in that role, but so it's National Police Week also. We should remember Officer Jesus Cordova of the Nogales Police Department was pursuing an alleged carjacker last Friday when he was shot to death. He was an 11-year veteran, left behind 2 daughters and a son, all under the age of 8. His wife is 5 months pregnant with a son who's already been named in the honor of his dad. That son will never know his father, but he will know that his father was a man of courage who was dedicated to public service, to providing peace and law and safety for the community that he served. Thoughts and prayers with the family, and yesterday I had the opportunity to talk with young Special Agent Kevin Crump of the ATF. He was shot in the face while going out working on an investigation. The bullet is lodged in his jaw. I was just really pleased with the spirit he showed when we talked on the phone, but it's a serious injury. So we know what our people, your people, face every day. And I want you to know that President Trump has this to say to you. Thank you for your service to the country. He gave us 3 executive orders the day I became the Attorney General. The first one was pretty darn clear: back the men and women in blue. And we've taken that very seriously. We think that maintaining, building up, maybe restoring the respect for your officers who are out there on the streets doing the job every day helps them be safer, helps bring down crime, helps them be more effective in serving their men and women of our country. And we just need to do that, and it's a top priority of ours. We know whose side we're on. We're on the side of law and order and the officers that we send on the street. We understand the risks that you take and the tools that you need to be effective. It's not business as usual in the Department of Justice. This is a Trump era of supporting law enforcement, and that's what we intend to do. So let me be clear, we've got some goals. I think you should have goals. One of them is to bring down violent crime. It went up in 15 and 16, 7% after basically 30 years of decline. That is not acceptable. We want the numbers to go down. We might have even had a modest decline last year. We want to look for a real decline this year. Homicides, we want them to start going down. We had a 12% increase in 2015, an 8% increase on top of that in 2016, the largest increases since 1968. I can remember that day and year. Not many of you can. But I mean, that is, we've made so much progress in crime. We do not need homicide to continue to go up. Opioid prescriptions, there's just too many of them being prescribed. And a lot of the doctors that are out there are over-prescribing, some of them criminally. We've indicted 150 doctors. Can you imagine that? Since 2017. Fentanyl prosecutions are up 3-fold, but these physicians have got to be stopped. We had 16 doctors who had in total prescribed 20 million pills illegally. One doctor, I understand, they seized $1 million in cash from his house. Hiding under the bed, I reckon. But what doctor do you know that's having the patients come in and pay in cash in huge numbers like that? So we're going to work on that. And the overdose deaths, you know those numbers, the largest increase in deaths we've ever seen, the largest amount of overdoses we've ever seen. It's the leading cause of death in America for Americans 50 years of age and younger is overdose deaths. That is a stunning number. So we're going to move on that, but it will not be successful without the 85% of law enforcement officers who are state, local, tribal in this country. We have to have a partnership. That's so obvious. If your goal is to reduce crime in America, you got to work with the people who are out there every day. And we're going to continue to work on that. I know that you particularly deal with more crimes than just murder and drugs. You've got frauds and public corruption and other cases of that kind. I do not believe they can be ignored. I mean, my 12 years as United States Attorney, we prosecuted focused on the number one issues. But I know, and you know, you cannot allow corruption. You can't allow elders, citizens to be defrauded by these no-good scoundrels that defraud them on a regular basis all over the country. And we're going to make that a priority for the Department of Justice. And often your people are the first ones to find them, but often the defendants are out of state or even out of the country. So we can perhaps provide a local or state force the backing and support to go internationally and stop some of these cases. That's for sure. So we have to also change our tactics and get better, because they change their tactics, and I know continual improvement in law enforcement is your goal, and it will be our goal. I understand you're concerned, and I am concerned, about forensic shortfalls, the backlog in our forensic systems. Well, that is a big, big issue to me. I am well aware that whole cases, big cases, are being delayed and blocked and often defeated by the bottlenecks in our forensic system. That's unacceptable in terms of how much money we spend on law enforcement and crime activities. It wouldn't take a lot of money to get our crime labs up to the highest level. I know you've advised us that you'd like to see ATF increase its class size for training in ballistics. We support that. We've talked about it. Our latest project is to create a second class to double those numbers. Hopefully that'll be enough. We're going to ask for the money to provide the equipment to allow two classes to proceed, and I believe it will help respond to the request that you've given us. In 2018, we'll invest more than $100 million in state and local labs to make them faster, more efficient, and more effective. The funds will help you move your cases. Move them to indictment. A lot of prosecutors won't move a case until they get the final forensic report. And then to conclusion. Good lab work, good forensic work clears the innocent and provides the evidence of guilt for the guilty. We'll provide grant funding also to identify the unsubmitted sexual assault kits, test them for DNA, and then assign personnel to pursue any new investigative leads. I was pleased to talk with Jean Shaheen, who's the ranking Democrat on the Appropriations Committee, where the money comes from, and she said, I'm supporting the Paul Coverdale funding, and would you help us with that? And I said, well, that was the bill I wrote. Paul Coverdale was a great friend and senator from Georgia, one of the best senators ever, I thought, and we named that bill in his honor. But it provides more flexibility to states to use the money in a way that they choose is best for them, rather than earmarked for very specific and narrow purposes. So I was glad to hear her view on that. And we talked earlier about the growing dark problem. This is a major issue for the country. Encryption threatens law enforcement. It keeps us from getting electronic evidence, even when we have a warrant based on probable cause signed by a federal judge. You can't open these phones. If you have a warrant to open somebody's safe and they won't open it, you can blow it open. You can go into their trunk of the car by force if need be, or the glove compartment, in a desk, or a filing cabinet. That's always been the law since, I guess, the founding of the American Republic. But this idea that you got a phone that somehow it's locked up and nobody, even a judge, can access the information, I think threatens our ability to be effective. You know, one of my theories is that good law enforcement is moving cases, and you can't move cases to get to the next case if everybody goes to trial. You need some guilty pleas. Guilty pleas are good for the soul, but it's also good for the criminal justice system, right? I mean, and if you've got the text messages, the phone messages, I never talked to him. Then you got 50 phone calls the day of the murder or the dope deal, then they're going to plead guilty. I mean, this is a huge thing. So if we lose this, in addition to the danger to our Title III wiretapping capabilities, I think it's a huge impact on law enforcement. And we'll lose a lot of guilty pleas and we'll slow down this whole system. Last year, the FBI was unable, are you going to talk about this, Dave? You probably are. Well, they couldn't do 7,000 devices. I'm sure you got a lot more than that you've been unable to access throughout the whole country. So it's a growing problem. There's no doubt about it. So we're working with the stakeholders in the private sector, in law enforcement, and in Congress to find a new solution to the problem. Congress is not interested too much, but they can become interested if we keep pushing and talking to them about it. And then you've got the big tech companies, and they're not so interested. But I meet with justice ministers from around the world, a lot of Europeans. They come to Washington and we'll talk, and this comes up almost every time. Europe's less supportive, I think, in the last several years than our Congress is, frankly. It's a real problem. But I think even I think the pendulum's moving in Europe. I think it's moving here. There are a lot of practical factors that work out there. But in the end, I hope you'll stay focused on this issue and be prepared to talk to Congress if and when the time is right. A careful, reasoned arguments, just telling the facts to members of Congress how this evidence will clear the innocent and convict the guilty is the kind of arguments we're just going to have to make. So reducing the backlog in improving sexual assault kits, solving encryption problems, these are important matters for you. There is much suspicion out there in Congress today, too much in my opinion, but the legislatures, Congress, the media, they do respond to good arguments, and we've just got to make them, and time will, I believe, be on our side. We're also restoring the rule of law with regard to immigration. That will reduce crime, and more of our crime, in fact, is international crime. And it's just the way things are happening. We know, for example, that virtually all of the meth, heroin, cocaine, fentanyl is coming across the southern border. No matter where it's made, it's being funneled across that border. Securing that border, establishing a wall, and reducing the illegality at the border will be a tremendous thing, not just for the immigration system, bringing integrity and respect back to it, but it will also help us in our fight against crime and drug abuse in America. Of that I am certain. There are 11 million people already here illegally. It's estimated that's more than the population of Georgia. And they got a lot of people in Georgia, actually. Getting to be a pretty good football team over there, recruiting all the top players. Darn. So we got 1.1 million, though, that get legal permanent residence in America every year. get a green card, LPR status. Within a few years, they can become a citizen. Don't let anybody tell you we're not a generous nation on immigration. That's the largest number of any nation in the world. In addition, we have some 600,000 people that come here simply to take jobs. And then we've got hundreds of thousands come as students. So we're very generous, but we, American people, want to see an end to this lawlessness. And it's not improper, it's not mean-spirited, it's right and just that if we're going to have a system, we enforce it. And this sanctuary city business, all these lawsuits, on the protests and all that go out there, at the bottom, they tend to be an affirmation of open borders. No matter what you do, if you catch them at the border, you're unkind. If somebody gets in the country, you can't deport them. If they come into the country and commit crimes, you can't deport them. Not only that you can't deport them, they're going to block us from even being able to investigate them and deport them. Now, this is a radical agenda. It is contrary to law. It demeans Tom Homan's ICE officers and the duties they have to do. We're not going to put up with it. We're going to fight it as hard as we can, and we're going to call on the people of these jurisdictions to ask their leaders, what are you doing? Do you not believe in law? Do you believe that all you got to do is get into America unlawfully and never to be deported? You can cross the border in Arizona today, be in San Francisco hauling drugs tomorrow, and be arrested and not be deported because it's a sanctuary city? Is this what they're saying? Yes, basically, that's what they're saying. It's unacceptable. We're not, and the president feels strongly about this, and so do I. So I think it's, first and foremost, regardless of the lawsuits, it's just wrong policy. It makes the places the citizens of these jurisdictions at greater risk than they ought to be. Whatever the crime rate is, it would be more significant. And we have so many fabulous people that wait their time, come into America, and we don't admit them if they're criminals. They have to establish that they're a person who's likely to be a good citizen before we admit them. But when the people come illegally, many of them have criminal records, extensive criminal records. So, but we're seeing some problems. In April, the number of illegal entrants at the border was triple what it was April last year when President Trump just got elected, and the numbers dropped dramatically. So we've got a lot to do, and we're working on it. We're sending 35 new assistant United States attorneys to the border. We are sending 18 immigration judges that handle the asylum claims and try to pull down that backlog that's gotten too high. And the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen and her team, and Tom may talk about it, but they're going to be referring more cases, 100% of the cases that they can move to us for prosecution. Arizona's doubled almost the number of prosecutions for entry into this country over last year. We're going to keep at that and see and we will make a difference. The president has made clear he's on fire about this thing. He's not happy about it, and I think the entire government's getting the message. So I embrace that support and direction. So if you cross the border unlawfully, even a first offense, then we're going to prosecute you. Those cases are up about double last year, and we're going to go higher this year. It's an offense to enter the country unlawfully. If you smuggle an illegal alien across the border, then we'll prosecute you for smuggling. If you're smuggling a child, then we're going to prosecute you. And that child will be separated from you probably as required by law. If you don't want your child to be separated, then don't bring them across the border illegally. It's not our fault that somebody does that. If you make false statements to an immigration officer or commit fraud in your system, in our system to obtain an immigration benefit, that's a felony too. And we'll put you in jail if you qualify. If you help others to violate the law, that's a felony too. In order to carry out these important new enforcement priorities, I have sent 35 prosecutors and 18 judges to the border. And we're going to move others. Our U.S. attorneys are committed to this. And they're going to reassign people within their offices because it's a national matter. It's an important matter nationally. It's not just one case. It's whether or not we have a border of integrity or lawlessness. And we want integrity in our border. The judges represent a 50% increase in the number of immigration judges at the border. So we're sending a message to the world, really. The border is not open. The border is not open. Don't come unlawfully. Make your claim, make your application, and wait your turn, as do millions of people throughout the world. Everything we do at the Department of Justice is dedicated to reducing crime in America. The most important thing that we can do to that end is to continue to improve our relationship with you, with state and local partners. I know that, and our team knows that. We want to become even better partners. We want to be a force multiplier for you. We can help you because sometimes we can reach defendants across state lines, national borders, even oceans. The work you do, that you have dedicated your lives to, is essential. I believe it. The Department of Justice believes it. The President Trump believes it. And so I want to close by thanking each of you once again for all the things you do for your country, the service you render. You can be certain about this. We have your back. You have our thanks. Thank you all. Mark, good to be with you. Oh, good. Thank you. Good. We got a, you want to do a picture? Thank you all. I got my...
We would ask the media to shut off the cameras and leave. This is a private meeting from going forward.